history of the English and later the British monarchs is pretty well known. It's been written about quite a lot. Why have you written a new book on the subject?
It's just, Michael, it's just the greatest story in Christendom. I mean, and also in the whole world. I mean, it is the most extraordinary study of human nature because these people, just like us, they're ordinary people with lives and loves like us, but they've had the most extraordinary experiences, even including our wonderful Elizabeth II. You go right back to Alfred the Great and you get these amazing. We must be mad, of course, to have had an hereditary monarchy for 1,200 years, but we have had it, and it somehow works. I think it works. I don't know what you think. I think it works.
Yes, I think it does. Let me keep asking you the questions, if that's all right, Peter. We have a tendency to divide our sovereigns into good and bad, and indeed you do in the book. For instance, you find Kings John and Richard III very bad. But I'm just wondering how good the good ones are. Both Richard the Lionheart and Henry V, both of whom you praise, were guilty of horrendous slaughters after victory in battle, weren't they?
Absolutely right. But if you judge them by medieval standards, they were pretty good for this country. I mean, that's all that mattered in those days. What was good for this country? And by medieval standards, they didn't do too badly. I personally am more of an admirer than I am of Richard of Lionheart and Henry V, of Henry II. I think he's a great chap. Henry II was a man who was well advised. He fought the church, which had far too much power and wealth. He failed because Thomas Becket wouldn't let him hit the church. And he also won a huge lump of France, Aquitaine, by marrying rather beautifully Eleanor of Aquitaine. I think Henry II deserves high marks. But also, goodness me, lots of other ones as well. I mean, William III, we often forget, not a very charismatic man, William of Orange, the man who came across from Holland and rescued us from the Catholics. So it was thought in those times a good thing to rescue from Catholics. James II. But William III finally recognised that it was Parliament that made the decisions, and that he had to accept that Parliament decided what happened in the country, not the king.
Since the 12th century, there has been a stream of pilgrims going to Canterbury to commemorate the murdered Thomas of Becket. So they may not necessarily warm to what you've said about Henry II. On the subject of William III, that does make me think of something. Do you not think that for a long period, England must have appeared to be the bad boy, the mad boy of Europe? I mean, when you think about it, you have Henry VIII, who is the most appalling tyrant. Then you have Elizabeth I, who executes a crowned head, that is to say her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots. Then the English behead their king, Charles I. And then, as you've just said, William III deposes his father-in-law. We must have looked chaotic and savage to the rest of Europe, didn't we?
Oh, bonkers. And the only thing I would say is that talking of the succession of one king to another or one king or queen to another, I mean, it's a lot smoother, this succession of Charles III to Elizabeth II, than the prime ministerial succession. Occasionally works quite well when you have a decent lot of people lining up to be kings or queens. Anyway, having said that, yes, of course, we look mad to Europeans. They must wonder, countries with presidents must wonder what on earth we're doing with these randomly, I mean, purely by accident of birth, made kings and queens. Quite true. But it's all part of the pageantry of the British monarchy, which fascinates the world. It may shock and amuse them, but it also fascinates the world and fascinates us. I mean, I love it all. I think it's marvelous. So to answer your question very precisely, yes, of course, looking back a long way, back to Henry VIII and Elizabeth, and before that, people behaved very badly towards people they didn't like. People that they threatened their claim to the crown, for example, like Mary Queen of Scots.
Yes. Now, I wonder whether, on balance, you would say that three of our best monarchs, possibly our best three monarchs, have been women: Elizabeth, Victoria, and Elizabeth. Discuss.
Yes. Funnily enough, my son Dan, who I think you have met, who wrote the preface to our book, he thinks that good old Anne and Elizabeth and Elizabeth II were three great monarchs. He's quite right. No, the women have been. I think is it possible, although Elizabeth, as you rightly said yourself, did make sure that other awkward people were executed, that she was a very good monarch. She was very moderate about religion, very sensible, and was a great believer in Parliament. And of course, Elizabeth II goes without criticism, I think. One wonderful line about Elizabeth II, which I love, is one that A.N. Wilson, I think, invented with apologies to Gilbert and Sullivan. He said, she didn't do a lot of things, but she did them frightfully well. I mean, she was a wonderful person, but she was very careful not to let her opinions obtrude. Whereas Charles III has said that he's going to be very stupid of him to let his opinions take control. So I think that's going to be all right.
Yes, Elizabeth II really displayed the most extraordinary self-control, really, in her 70-year reign. I can't think that she ever committed any indiscretion or put a foot wrong, and that is an absolutely remarkable record. I also very much agree with you about Elizabeth I. To her, we owe really the Church of England as we have it.
Yes.
I mean, obviously it was invented by her father, but the moderate, middle-of-the-road sort of Church of England, which I think has been so useful to our politics, we owe to Elizabeth I. And,
right.
and she recognised that at the time. She thought that fanaticism was deeply dangerous to her reign and to her country.